In a small town where boxing was king, one arrogant champion thought he could humiliate a young black girl just to feed his pride. He dragged her into the ring, expecting laughter, mockery, and an easy victory. But what unfolded that night left the entire crowd speechless and turned humiliation into the most shocking moment this town had ever seen. Stay with this story until the very end, because when the truth was revealed, it changed everything. The story begins in a small southern town where boxing was more than a sport. It was a spectacle. In the heart of this town stood Marcus Hale, an undefeated local boxing champion whose name carried both respect and arrogance. Marcus thrived on attention, enjoying the roar of the crowd as much as the sting of his opponent's punches. But his victories had bred pride, and pride had soured into cruelty. He believed no one, especially not anyone beneath him, could ever challenge his dominance. One evening at a crowded community gym, Marcus sought new ways to keep the spotlight burning. His eyes fell on Leah Johnson, a 16-year-old black girl who swept the gym floors after school to help her struggling single mother. Leah was quiet, reserved, and unnoticed by most. But to Marcus, she became the perfect target. What better way to feed his ego than to drag an untrained girl into the ring and humiliate her in front of hundreds? The audience chuckled when he teased the idea, assuming it was just bluster. But Marcus was serious. He announced that at the next weekend's exhibition match, he would give the little janitor girl a chance to face him. The crowd erupted in laughter, unaware of the storm Marcus had just unleashed. What began as a cruel joke was about to ignite a story that no one in that gym or the town would ever forget. Leah was no stranger to humiliation. She lived in a world where prejudice was stitched into the fabric of everyday life. Her mother worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, and Leah often bore the weight of whispered insults at school, where her clothes were too worn, her hands too calloused, and her voice too soft to be heard. But what no one knew was that Leah carried a quiet strength. Every night, after the gym closed, she would shadowbox in the dimly lit ring, mimicking the moves she had memorized while cleaning. She watched the boxers, studied their footwork, and practiced punches against the heavy bag when no one was watching. The rhythm of boxing became her escape from a world that told her she wasn't enough. When Marcus announced his challenge, the town buzzed with excitement. To them, it was entertainment. An arrogant champion amusing himself by humiliating a poor black girl. No one thought about what it meant for Leah. She overheard the laughter, the mocking whispers, the wagers made against her before she had even agreed to step in the ring. Leah could have walked away, but something inside her refused. Accepting the fight was more than facing Marcus. It was facing every insult, every door slammed in her face, every reminder that the world saw her as small. The ring, once her secret sanctuary, was now her battlefield, and she silently vowed, if they wanted a show, she would give them one they would never forget. The week leading up to the fight was filled with tension. Marcus trained with smug confidence, knowing his victory was guaranteed. To him, this was a performance, not a contest. He strutted through town, boasting about how quickly he would put the girl down. Each retelling grew more exaggerated, drawing laughter and applause from those eager for a spectacle. Meanwhile, Leah walked through the same streets, but her path was far lonelier. Whispers followed her wherever she went. Some mocked her for even considering the fight, saying she was foolish to think she could last even a single round. Others pitied her, convinced she was walking into public humiliation she would never live down. Only a handful of voices, her mother's steady encouragement, a quiet nod from an elderly boxing coach who had seen her practicing after hours, offered her the courage she needed. For Leah, every insult became fuel. Every laugh added weight to her determination. She trained in silence, rising before dawn to run the cracked sidewalks of her neighborhood, punching the heavy bag long after her arms burned, studying tapes of fighters when she could sneak access to the old gym office. The town expected a joke. Marcus expected an easy win. But Leah was preparing for something far more serious. She was preparing to prove, not just to Marcus, but to the entire town, that strength was not defined by arrogance, nor by the color of one's skin. The gym was packed beyond capacity that Saturday night. People pressed against the ropes, the air thick with the smell of sweat and anticipation. Vendors sold popcorn as though it were a circus act, and bets were placed openly. No one wagered on Leah. She was seen as the clown in a cruel performance. Marcus entered first, soaking in the cheers, throwing mock jabs into the air and flexing for the crowd. His presence filled the room, his arrogance feeding on the roar of approval. Then Leah walked in. She wore hand-me-down gloves and a t-shirt 2 sizes too big. The laughter was immediate. Whistles, jeers, and mocking claps echoed around her. But Leah kept her head high, her eyes locked on the ring. She didn't hear their taunts. She only heard her own heartbeat, steady and strong. When the bell rang, Marcus danced toward her with exaggerated slowness, taunting her, feigning punches to the delight of the crowd. Leah remained still, her eyes sharp, her body poised. She had studied his every move over the years. And now, all that silent practice came alive. The audience expected fear. What they saw instead was focus. And though Marcus landed the first blow, the smirk on his face faltered when Leah didn't crumble. The fight everyone thought would be a joke was about to turn into something else entirely. The first round was Marcus's show. He danced, he mocked, he threw light punches as if sparing her. The crowd laughed louder with each swing, but Leah absorbed every moment. Not as humiliation, but as calculation. She watched his footwork, the drop of his shoulder before a jab, the lazy way he carried his guard. She saw not a champion, but a man blinded by pride. By the second round, Leah's plan began. She moved faster, her punches sharper, landing light but precise hits that Marcus hadn't expected. The crowd's laughter softened into murmurs. Marcus, annoyed, swung harder, but his arrogance betrayed him. He underestimated her endurance, her ability to anticipate his rhythm. Every punch Leah landed was more than a strike. It was a statement. Each one carried the weight of every door slammed in her face, every insult hurled her way, every person who laughed at her existence. Marcus grew angrier, sloppier, while Leah grew calmer, sharper. By the third round, the gym fell silent. Marcus's face, once grinning, now dripped with sweat and frustration. Leah had not only survived, she was holding her ground. And when she delivered a clean, stunning hook that staggered Marcus back for the first time, the silence broke into gasps. The fight was no longer a joke. It was a battle. And for the first time, Marcus and the entire town realized Leah was not the one being humiliated. The fourth round began with Marcus desperate to reclaim his dominance. He charged at Leah with full force, throwing heavy punches meant to end the match. But Leah had trained for this moment in shadows no one saw. Her footwork carried her out of danger, her counters sharp and deliberate. The crowd leaned forward, no longer laughing but hanging on every movement. Each time Marcus swung, Leah answered. Each time he taunted, she responded with silence and precision. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone knew it. Then it happened. The unthinkable moment that no one believed possible. Leah, the girl who cleaned gym floors, the girl mocked and underestimated, saw her opening. With flawless timing, she delivered a punch that sent Marcus stumbling to the canvas. The crowd erupted, disbelief crashing into cheers. Marcus tried to rise, but his pride was heavier than his body. The referee began the count, and with each number, the truth became clearer. The arrogant champion had been defeated, not by another professional fighter, but by the very girl he had chosen to humiliate. When the final count rang out, Leah stood tall, her chest heaving, her eyes unblinking. The crowd, stunned into silence once more, erupted into applause, not mockery, but respect. The joke had backfired. The humiliation belonged not to Leah, but to Marcus. News of the fight spread far beyond the small town. What had started as a cruel act of arrogance transformed into a story of resilience, justice, and unshakable strength. Leah had not only defeated Marcus in the ring, she had shattered the prejudice that fueled his cruelty. For weeks, people talked of little else. Children whispered about Leah's courage, and parents pointed to her as proof that dignity could triumph over arrogance. Even those who once laughed at her began to walk with their heads bowed, realizing they had been part of the cruelty. Marcus disappeared from the spotlight, his arrogance broken by the very girl he sought to humiliate. Leah, however, became more than a local legend. She inspired others who felt overlooked, dismissed, or judged by the color of their skin. She showed them that strength was not found in the roar of the crowd, but in the quiet determination to rise when the world expected you to fall. Years later, people would still recall the night Leah Johnson walked into the ring as a janitor's daughter and walked out as a symbol of courage. Her victory was more than a fight. It was a reminder, because sometimes the greatest battles are not won with fists alone, but with the unshakable belief that dignity, once defended, can never be taken away. And so the question lingers: how many Leahs has the world overlooked, never realizing the power they carry within? If you believe stories like this need to be heard, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video so more people can see how dignity and courage can triumph against arrogance and prejudice.